Hey YouTube, Matches 860. Smoking a Moneymaker cigar, a Breva from Sergeant Savinelli. Very tasty. Gonna tell a little side story to my work videos. Story that I think about every summer about this time. About 45 years ago. July 31st, 1973. I was finishing out my final days at the first nursing home I worked at. And we were expecting a new patient to come in that morning, sometime before noontime. And sometime around 11 o'clock, I noticed the ambulance pull up the side door. Figured I'd go out and hold the door for the guys. It was before the days of ADA and automatic doors in nursing homes. So I went out and opened up the door. I was looking to the east towards Boston, and a fog had developed, which was fairly common. But it was so thick that it had worked its way into the suburbs. We were about 15 miles west. So there was this haze out there. Sun was washed out. Kind of a pleasant sight, actually. So I held the door for these guys as they took the gurney in with the new patient on it. And they were dropping the patient off at one of the first rooms inside the door. So I stayed out on the steps. And all of a sudden, I heard all these tones and chatter on the ambulance radio. I couldn't really make out any of the voices, but these tones, they just kept going off. And the guys came back out with the empty gurney, and I said, "Hey, your radio's going nuts." And one of them kind of laughed and said, "Oh yeah?" And they were putting the gurney back in the back of the ambulance. And the two guys slammed the door, ran for their doors, got into the ambulance, and they must have laid a strip of rubber 50 feet long. In all the confusion, I remembered either hearing Boston or Logan Airport, one of the two. And I knew something was up, but I didn't know what it was. So a little later on, I was in the patient sitting area. They always had the TV going. And on the news, they mentioned, first thing, that there was a plane crash in Boston. So the story is Delta Flight 723 had left Burlington, Vermont, initially direct for Logan Airport. At the last minute, they got diverted to Manchester, New Hampshire to pick up some passengers who had been stranded because their flight had been delayed or canceled, one of the two. So they left Manchester, New Hampshire for Boston. And as they entered the Boston area, they learned that there was heavy fog and that visibility was really, really reduced at Logan. Anyone who's interested in aviation, you can Google Delta Flight 723, July 31st, 1973. You can read the report on the accident. It's quite involved and in-depth, and I really won't get into all of it, but I'll give you the thumbnail of it. The flight was cleared to land, runway 4 right, I believe, and the controller guided the flight to the glide slope for runway 4 right, and it was kind of a weird setup for the Delta flight. They had to intercept the glide slope at a weird angle and then fly it in a relatively short distance to the runway. They entered high and fast and, of course, tried to make all their adjustments to do a proper landing. And unfortunately, when they got to the bottom of the glide slope, they were to the right of the runway and too low. At Logan Airport, there's a seawall at the end of runway 4 right and 4 left, and the plane caught the seawall with its landing gear and literally disintegrated on impact, throwing aircraft parts and luggage and the whole bit onto the end of the runway, or to the right of it. Caught fire. It was a terrible mess. And initially, 2 people survived. One of them died within a couple hours of the crash. But there was one guy who suffered really, really severe burns that lingered till the following December. And I can recall, it seemed like daily in the newspaper they would give an update on this guy. You know, he's still alive and still suffering from the burns, and of course had infections and all kinds of side problems with it. But I think there was always this hope that this guy was going to survive and at least take part of the sting out of this disaster. But in December, he passed, and I can just remember this I think everybody had this terrible, terrible feeling that, the little bit of hope that there was gone. Terrible, terrible accident. So whenever I think about that first job, that's the side story that goes with it. At least we have the moneymaker Breva here, bringing us some comfort. And of course, if you've been following Sergeant Savinelli, everything's backwards this summer. He's smoking his custom-built pipe. Normally he smokes cigars during the summer. I gave up the pipe for this morning for the cigar. So anyway, that's my story. Thanks an awful lot for joining me. Hope you have a great weekend.